He said it was a business trip to Beijing, yet at the station, I saw him, hands on her face, lips pressed to hers, while I stood frozen just meters away, my suitcase slipping from my hand. That was the moment I knew, the life I thought I had was over. The noise of the train station swirled around me, shouts of vendors, children tugging at their mothers, the sharp whistle of the departing train, but everything inside me had gone utterly silent. My husband, the man who had kissed my forehead gently that morning and told me he would miss me, was here in the open, cradling another woman as though she was his entire world. I should have screamed, I should have confronted him, but my body refused to move. My hand clutched the suitcase handle until my knuckles went white, yet my heart felt as though it had already slipped and shattered on the floor. He was supposed to be going on a trip for work, to Beijing. That's what he had told me, carefully packing his suits and files the night before, assuring me it was routine, nothing unusual. I had even made him sandwiches for the train ride. And yet, here he was, whispering into another woman's ear, the kind of whispers I used to live for, then kissing her with the hunger of a man who had never known me at all. I turned away quickly, afraid his eyes might sweep over the crowd and catch mine, afraid of what it would mean if our gazes met. My legs trembled beneath me as I stumbled toward the nearest pillar, pressing my back against the cold concrete to steady myself. My breath came shallow, like I'd been running for miles, though I hadn't moved more than a few steps. The betrayal was a blade I hadn't seen coming, one that cut so deeply it left me numb before it could even bleed. My mind spun back to how we had begun. We had met on a rainy afternoon, both reaching for the same umbrella at a corner store. He had laughed, that easy, charming laugh of his, and insisted I take it. Later, he had tracked me down through mutual friends and invited me for coffee. It felt like fate then, as if the rain itself had conspired to bring us together. I had believed in him, in us. I had believed in every late-night promise he made, in every smile that softened his tired face when he came home from work. I had built my world around him, brick by brick, trust by trust. And now, with a single kiss to someone else, he had torn it all down. The loudspeaker announced the next departure, startling me back into the present. I couldn't breathe in that station anymore, not with the sight of them burned into my eyes. My body moved on autopilot, dragging my suitcase behind me as I hurried out into the gray light of the city. The world looked the same, people laughing, buses honking, the usual chaos of life. But for me, everything had shifted. The life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was safe, was nothing but a carefully crafted illusion. That evening, he called me. His voice was calm, steady, just as it always was. "I'll be in Beijing for 3 days," he said. "Don't wait up tonight." The audacity in his tone almost made me laugh. He was probably in some hotel with her, speaking to me as though nothing had changed. But it had. Something inside me had broken, yes, but another part of me had awakened. The fog of denial cleared, and with it came a fierce clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't confront him right away. Confrontation would give him power. He would twist his words, offer excuses, maybe even gaslight me into doubting what I'd seen. No, I stayed quiet, my silence sharper than any accusation. I made dinner, ate alone, and stared at the empty chair across from me. I remembered all the nights I had waited for him, convincing myself his late hours were just part of his job, that he was sacrificing for us. But, now I saw the truth. He hadn't been sacrificing, he had been indulging, and I had been blind. After dinner, I went to our bedroom, the room where we had once shared whispered dreams. I opened the closet and stared at his neatly hung suits. They no longer looked like symbols of his ambition but costumes of a liar. My hands trembled as I reached for the safe where we kept important documents. I pulled out our marriage certificate, our joint bank account statements, and then, slowly, deliberately, I opened my laptop. Filing for divorce was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was years in the making, I realized now. Every unanswered call, every strange scent on his shirt, every sudden meeting that stole him away from me had been building to this. I had ignored the signs, hoping love would outweigh suspicion. But tonight, my hope died, and in its place, determination was born. As I filled out the forms, tears blurred my vision. I wasn't crying for him, I was crying for the woman I used to be, the one who believed in fairy tales and forever promises. I was mourning her innocence, her trust. By the time I printed the papers, my tears had dried. My hands were steady. I was no longer his naive wife, I was a woman reclaiming her life. I remember standing by the window that night, looking out at the city lights flickering in the distance. Somewhere out there, he was with her, thinking I was none the wiser. I whispered to myself, this ends now. The words felt like both a goodbye and a promise. Memories clawed at me through the night. The time he had surprised me with flowers after my promotion. The way he had held me when I lost my father. The soft laughter we once shared over silly jokes no one else would understand. I wanted to hate him completely, but part of me couldn't forget the man I had loved. That contradiction was its own kind of torture, loving someone who no longer existed. But as dawn crept through the curtains, painting the sky in pale hues, I felt something shift within me. I realized I wasn't trapped. His betrayal hadn't caged me, it had freed me. For too long, I had defined myself by him, by our marriage. Now, I had a chance to define myself again, not as his wife, but as me. When he returned from his so-called trip, suitcase in hand, I greeted him calmly. He looked tired, but there was a smugness in his eyes, as though he had gotten away with something. He kissed my cheek lightly, the way someone might greet a distant acquaintance. I let him. I didn't show anger, didn't demand answers. Instead, I placed a neatly stacked pile of papers on the dining table. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Divorce," I said simply. My voice didn't tremble. My eyes didn't waver. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his lips part as though searching for words. For once, he was the one caught off guard. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, finally, he chuckled nervously, as if I had made a joke. "You're serious?" he asked. "Yes." My answer was as firm as steel. In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was, not the man I had loved, not the husband I had cherished, but a coward who thought lies could build a kingdom. He wasn't worth my tears anymore. That night, after he stormed out in disbelief, I sat by myself, the signed documents in front of me. My chest ached, but beneath the ache was a spark of something powerful, freedom, resilience, maybe even hope. The road ahead would not be easy, I knew that. But I also knew I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. And as I closed my eyes, I promised myself, never again would I let someone else write the story of my worth. From here on, it would be my story, my strength, my life. The papers were signed, but the war wasn't over, because he thought I'd crawl back. What he didn't know was that I'd rise higher without him, and his mistress would watch him lose everything he tried to steal from me. The first few weeks after filing the divorce were like walking through a fog. I woke up in an empty bed every morning, the silence of the house echoing too loudly around me. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for the other side of the bed, expecting warmth, only to find cold sheets. Loneliness crept in like an unwelcome guest, whispering doubts into my ears. Was I strong enough to start over? Had I made a mistake? My heart still ached with memories, but I knew turning back wasn't an option. He called, of course. Not immediately, his arrogance wouldn't let him, but soon enough. "We can talk this through," he said one night, his tone carefully measured. "You're just overreacting. I don't want to lose everything we've built." His words were wrapped in manipulation, as if I hadn't seen him with my own eyes at the station, as if I was still the woman who once hung on every syllable he spoke. I listened quietly, letting him spill excuses, half apologies, and promises I knew were empty. When he finally asked, "Don't you miss me?" I responded with silence. That silence hurt him more than any accusation could. He hung up soon after, but I knew it wasn't the end. Life after betrayal wasn't smooth. Bills piled up. Friends I thought would stand by me suddenly vanished, afraid of choosing sides or simply uncomfortable with my pain. Nights felt endless, stretching into hours of staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene at the station again and again. But each time I remembered, I also felt the fire of resolve burning stronger. I refused to let his deceit be the final chapter of my story. I threw myself into work. My career had always been something I'd quietly nurtured in the background, but now it became my anchor. I stayed late, took on projects others avoided, and pushed myself to prove my worth. At first, it was a way to distract myself, but soon I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Colleagues began to notice, opportunities opened up, and for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by being someone's wife. I was just me, and that was enough. Meanwhile, his world started to crack. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances, missed deadlines at his firm, arguments behind closed doors, his mistress growing restless. The woman he had kissed so passionately at the station was no longer content with stolen moments. She wanted more. Public acknowledgement, financial security, the kind of life I had once built with him. But he wasn't ready to give her that, not fully. He wanted both worlds, and slowly, both worlds began slipping through his fingers. He tried again to reach me, this time in person. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, suit wrinkled, tie askew, eyes tired. I made a mistake, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. She doesn't mean anything. You're my wife. You always have been. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and realized how much he had changed in my eyes. Once, his presence had been enough to steady me. Now, it only reminded me of betrayal. No, I said simply. I was your wife. You chose otherwise. And now, I choose myself. His jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. He wasn't used to me defying him, wasn't used to losing control. He stormed out, muttering under his breath, and I knew he would turn his bitterness against me. But I didn't care anymore. I was no longer afraid of him, of what he thought, of what people might say. My strength was no longer tied to his approval. Months passed, and my life began to blossom in ways I hadn't imagined. I traveled for work, standing in conference rooms filled with people who valued my voice. I reconnected with old friends who reminded me of who I was before marriage had consumed me. I even began to laugh again, not the forced, polite laughter I had once given him, but genuine laughter that bubbled up from a place of freedom. He, on the other hand, unraveled. His mistress, impatient with broken promises, began whispering his secrets to people who shouldn't have heard them. His company lost clients. His reputation, once polished and enviable, became tainted with rumors of dishonesty and scandal. And still, he clung to the belief that I would return, that I would rescue him from the wreckage of his own making. One evening, he appeared again. This time, there was no arrogance left in him, no smugness. Just a man hollowed out by his own choices. Please, he said, voice cracking. I don't have anyone else. You were always the one who believed in me. I stood there, the weight of his words hanging between us. Part of me pitied him, but a larger part of me remembered the station, the kiss, the lies, the way he had expected me to accept scraps of his affection while giving the best of himself to another. I shook my head. You were right, I told him softly. I always believed in you. But now, I believe in myself. He flinched as though I had struck him. Without another word, he turned and left, disappearing into the night. I watched him go, feeling no regret, no ache, only the steady beat of freedom in my chest. As time went on, I built a new life, one where my happiness didn't depend on anyone else's choices. I learned to enjoy solitude, to savor mornings with coffee and silence, to celebrate small victories that were mine alone. I discovered strength I never knew I had, and with it came peace. The last I heard of him, his mistress had left, his career was in ruins, and he was moving away, chasing a fresh start in another city. Perhaps he would rebuild, perhaps he wouldn't. But it was no longer my concern. His story was no longer tied to mine. Looking back, I realized his betrayal had been the cruelest gift. It had shattered me, yes, but in the fragments, I had found pieces of myself I had long forgotten. It forced me to confront the truth, to step out of the shadows of a marriage built on lies, and to embrace the light of my own strength. So when people ask me how I survived, I tell them this: heartbreak does not define you, betrayal does not end you. They are merely chapters, painful, yes, but necessary to push you toward the story you were always meant to write. And my story, it didn't end with him. It began with me.